Hey everyone, my name is Alexandra and I am a watercolor artist. As we are heading into winter, closer to Christmas, I think we're about a month away now, I want to take you guys through some winter and Christmas tutorials. So today we are going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint winter florals and winter botanical elements. So this is something that if you guys do any painting with florals or botanicals, you guys can take each little aspect that we learn and you guys can put it into your paintings. Let's get started. Alright, so for this tutorial I'm using 140 pound cold press watercolor paper. For paints I'm using Philosophy and Co's paints. I have a mixture of colors that I'm using from their palettes. I'm mostly using the terrain palette, but in the description below I'll have listed the colors that you guys will need. Other than that, I have 2 cups of water, one for dirty, one for clean. Paintbrushes, I am using Opus's paintbrush. I have size 0. If you guys want to use a bigger and smaller one, you can, just depends on what size you're doing this painting. And lastly, you will need a napkin for drying your paintbrush on. So the first thing that we're going to paint is a pine branch. Pine branches are often a staple in any winter florals, botanicals that I paint, especially when I'm painting things like my Christmas wreaths and stuff like that. I often will use pine branches. So we are going to take our smaller paintbrush, and I've mixed a color together that I used green, blue, and then just a tiny bit of brown, or you guys can use a tiny bit of yellow in there, just to give me a super nice, deep color. So using the very tip of my paintbrush, I'm actually just going to move those out of the way, I am going to do a super skinny line coming down, and then I'm sort of going to paint in a feather-like motion, and I'm adding the tiny little needles. So one thing that you'll notice is that each needle sort of varies in thickness. I don't have them all really uniform in the same way. I kind of switch that around a little bit. So just so that you guys can see, I'm gonna paint a few of these all the way across my page. And I'm just doing really mini ones. Again, if it's easier for you guys can grab an even smaller paintbrush. I like sometimes challenging myself and using something a little bit bigger so that I can really practice just using the very, very tip of my brush. And then with something like this, if I want to get a little bit more into a dry on dry technique, I'm okay with that too, because that gives it a very natural look. And if you guys are wondering what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the different watercolor painting techniques, then I do have a tutorial on the basic techniques when you're starting out with watercolor. All right, so I'm just gonna do one more little one up here. And again, you'll notice I'm just doing super, super fine, delicate lines, having them sort of switching around what way they're facing, but essentially they all are coming in towards that center line. Now that we are done with our pine branches, we are going to move on to painting a winter flower. One of my favorite ones to paint are white anemones because they have that really pretty, deep, dark navy blue center and the white petals that come out from it. So for this one, I am going to paint the center first. So I'm going in with my navy blue paint, and I'm actually going to start with a layer that's a little bit more watered down. And because I'm creating sort of a pattern on my page, I'm just going to put a few circles around my page and then we'll add layers as we go. So I have the nice navy blue, and I'm just going to paint a nice light circle with my blue. So I'm just doing a few of those around, and we're going to be adding more details as soon as the circles dry. So before we go on to adding more details into the center, we are going to go ahead and paint the petals. So with painting white, it's obviously tricky to paint when you're painting on white paper. So what I want to do is I want to choose a color that can kind of be the undertone that I'm looking for. So often I'll go for gray. I am actually just gonna grab one of my gray paints. So I just grabbed this from another Art Philosophy and Co palette. I grabbed it from my Woodlands palette. And what I want to do is I'll find a clear spot on here and I want to really water it down so that it's gonna show up on my paper super, super light. All right, so I can see when I put my paintbrush on my napkin, the color is coming across really light. So now for each petal, they sort of have wider petals. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna paint the shape in. I'm okay if the blue bleeds into it just a little bit. And I have it, again, really, really light on my paper here. So it's really faint. You can't see it way too much, but I'm gonna let it dry and then I'm gonna add a little bit more to it as we go, just to give it more definition. So I'm going now across all my flowers, and essentially what I'm doing is I'm painting 5 larger, really loose petals. I'm okay if they kind of run into each other. This part might be a little tricky to see on the camera, but I'm gonna do that with the rest of the petals, and then I'll show you how we go in and add some details. All right, so you guys will really faintly be able to see the flowers that I painted. So I have just sort of super light gray, kind of just blobs in the shape of where the petals are, but we're gonna go in and add more detail now. So I'm gonna start with the navy blue. And what I wanna do, I'm using my small paintbrush again, and what I wanna do is just add tiny little dots in the center, just like a little cluster, so they can kind of overlap with each other. And then I'm gonna do the exact same thing, but around the outside of the circle that I painted. So I'm just giving it that definition. So I'm gonna go around now and do the same thing to all of the flowers that I've painted. And it's just tiny little, I want to say cluster of dots, just so that you guys know that it is okay if they overlap, if they run into each other. It doesn't have to be perfect circles. I'm just using the very, very tip of my paintbrush to add in these super small dots. And by doing them just in the center and then around the edges, you'll see how it just gives depth to these flowers. So now we're gonna add some more definition to our petals. So I'm going in with the gray again. I can even add like a tiny bit of blue to it just to give it a blue undertone. And with that, I'm just gonna add some definition to my petals. So I'm sort of imitating where the edge of the petal would be. And I'm just filling in, not filling in, but kind of outlining the shape in a very loose way, meaning that I'm leaving white space in there. And I'm just adding that definition by using this sort of tone-on-tone glazing method. So if you guys want a tutorial that's a little bit more in depth on how to paint these flowers, then leave a comment below and let me know. And I would love to show you guys, they're such beautiful flowers. I paint watercolor portraits, and in a lot of those I have bouquets in the photos. And this is a super common flower that I have in the photos that I get from weddings, as well as if ever I'm doing a custom just on wedding bouquets. Again, these flowers are very often in them because they're so delicate, they're so beautiful. So it's a really fun one to paint, and there are ways to either make them with a lot of detail or a lot more simple. So with these, essentially what I'm doing is I'm just adding some shadowing, but because of the light color, it still gives it the illusion that it is still a white flower. And then the other way to continue to give that illusion is just by leaving white spaces. All right, so that is it for painting the anemones. Now I'm just gonna paint a nice wintry leaf. I don't know if you guys know what this leaf is called, let me know, but it's just another staple that I use often when I'm painting watercolor wreaths. So to give everything the really wintry look, all of my branches, my leaves, I sort of want to give them more of a blue undertone rather than yellow. Often if I'm painting Christmas things, I might lean a little bit the other way, but because I just want to give this a really nice, delicate, wintry look, I'm mixing whatever green I use with blue, just to give it that really cool undertone. So here I'm mixing, just seeing which paint I'm using. I'm mixing my vine leaf with my blue shadow paint. And when I test it on my napkin, I can see that it's sort of a really gray blue. So now we're just gonna paint little leaf branches. So I'm gonna start with my center line, and I'm doing a nice curved line, and I'm just gonna do long and skinny leaves. So the tip of my paintbrush is down, and I'm applying pressure as I pull back, and I'm just creating these super delicate leaves. So I'm changing the direction a little bit as I go. I'm putting them on either side of that center stem so that they don't perfectly line up with the leaf on the other side. And again, I'm using a green paint here, but I added some blue just to give it that nice cool undertone. So we're gonna add another one in. I was just deciding where to put it, but I'm gonna stick it down here. So again, tip of my paintbrush is down, applying pressure as I pull back, and I'm just doing a variety of long and skinny leaves. I'm kind of curving them a little bit, giving them some interest, some dimension. So things like this can look really pretty painted on either just a wintry painting for your home, or I love doing this kind of thing on Christmas cards, or like I've mentioned already, taking all of these elements that we're doing and putting them into a wreath painting. So I'm going to add one more, just continuing to follow that same concept. So super simple, super easy leaves, but because of the really thin and long leaves, it just gives us such a beautiful and delicate look. So I'm just gonna attach each of them to the stem with a nice skinny line, and we're gonna leave it at that for our leaves. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna add in is some berries. I'm gonna start by adding sort of a beigey cream color, just to keep it nice and neutral, and then because when we think of winter, we often do think of having the red in there, so we're gonna add a little bit of a pop of red. But I'll start with just mixing together. I have sort of a beige color here. You guys can mix that together by doing like a little bit of brown. I have a bit of pink and orange that I've mixed. And what I'm gonna do, super simple, we're just painting circles. And because they're small, you don't really need to be too particular with them. So I have a couple clusters of circles. I did 3 there. I might do 5 over here. And then I might do another 3 in the middle here. So while those dry, I'm gonna add in sort of a different style, but we're gonna do red ones. So I'm going to paint in the branch first. So I'm mixing brown and green just to sort of get a muddy brown or muddy green for the stem. You guys can just use brown if you'd like. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to paint some really thin branches coming up. And I just have them really wavy. I do another branch stem over here. You can kind of have them weaving through each other if you want. And we'll just mix a few throughout our page. Okay, so while I have this paint on my paintbrush, I'm gonna add the little branches to the berries that I already painted. So what I'm doing is I'm just starting the line from the base of where the berry is, and I'm just attaching them into a single stem. So with the ones with 3, just painting the lines and having them all come down to a point. This cluster of 5, I'm gonna choose where my base point is. So I'm gonna do it off to the side a little bit just to change the angle. I can pick one berry to start from, and then you just fill in the lines in between. So now we're gonna go back to the ones where we're gonna add some red into it. I'm just gonna add a little one in this corner here, just so we can really space everything out on our page. Just have that nice balance of colors. So now that I'm going in with red, I have this sourwood red on my paper. Because this painting specifically is a lot more cool, I want to sort of tone it down because the red right now is pretty aggressive. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna add some of my yellow. And then I'm actually just mixing it with a little bit of this blue that I have here. And my goal, so most of my color is red and yellow with just a tiny bit of blue, and my goal essentially is to just tone it down so it's not so aggressive. It matches sort of the rest of the painting with it being very neutral and wintry. So now that I have a nice, really deep red, I'm gonna go to these branches that I painted, and I'm just gonna add little clusters of berries along the branches. So again, I'm painting circles here, but it's not perfect circles. I'm kind of just clustering the red on there. And mixed with everything else that I've already painted, it just adds such a nice pop of color. So whenever I'm painting, whether it's something wintry, summery, fall, I like to think about that. I like to think about if I want to add warmth into my painting, if I want it to simply just be cool colors. With this style, I love adding just that little bit of warmth with the brown and the red. So just clustering, some branches have more, some have less. Some come further down, but again, it's just a bunch of little circles. And then as you guys can see, I deliberately chose a red that's more on the neutral side and less bright, just so that it really flows nicely with everything else that I've painted. So now I'm gonna go back in super quick to the first berries that I painted, and I'm just gonna mix a little bit darker of the tone that I already painted with. And I'm gonna add a bit of color to the bottom of each of these. And then I'm just gonna add little stems off of the top. Just because usually if you see berries and you look at them, it's not just a round circle. They have a little bit more dimension to them. So I'm just adding just a little cluster of lines at the top of each one. Right, and there you guys have a watercolor painting of winter florals. If you guys do follow along and paint any of these, please do share it with me. There's so many different things that you guys can incorporate each of these elements into. So I would absolutely love to see how you guys are doing this, whether it's a wreath, a card, a painting, just your way to practice with watercolor. Share it with me on Instagram at Alexandra Victoria Studio. Also, comment below what other Christmas winter things you'd like to learn in this coming winter season. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I see that a lot of you guys watching are not subscribed yet, so make sure to subscribe, like this video, and we'll see you next time.